I love that. I want to
Hey,
call him out real quick.
what's up?
There's a person in the chat named Lance Independent, and he was actually somebody I was going to bring up and reference. Okay. If you don't know Dr. Lance Bush, you should go check his stuff out. He has some of my absolute favorite discussions and conversations on non-realist morality. He gets into all the objective subjective debates, and he is just an absolute wonderful presenter. He's very, very knowledgeable. And so yeah, I have listened to a bunch of his stuff, and he has been very valuable for me in understanding this topic, because it is very dense, it is very nuanced, and the way that a lot of people discuss this, in my opinion, is just not very well, honestly, and I'm
Okay.
sure no philosopher. I don't have a PhD in anything. I'm just a guy that enjoys this stuff. But Dr. Bush does. He is. So go look up his stuff. It's easy to find, Lance Independent. So yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. I mean, if he wants to call and talk to us and teach us, because like, I I know even less
Eh.
than what you do. All right. I just sit here and bring people that know more than me about something so that they can do the talking and I
Yeah.
can do the listening.
That's the way to do it. That's the way
You
to
know,
do it. Yeah, trust me. I know that. Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I like hopefully learn something.
Yeah.
Um, like before the show, we were having backstage amongst the crew a pretty passionate conversation
Mm.
that I sort of overheard. That I didn't get into it too much, but it was about, I think, about whether we should be, sending astronauts to space or like
Mm-hmm.
watching rockets launch and stuff, or feeding children.
Mm-hmm.
And while I didn't say anything, I was thinking, can we ethically do both?
Mm.
That is the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, for sure. For sure it is. And I think this is why, because conversations like that, I think are things a lot of us instinctually kind of want to engage in, even if we say like we don't. We do enjoy those thought experiments and stuff. And we've been doing it for a really long time, apparently. A couple of things about humanity that just seems to be the case all the way through our history. We tell stories, we play music, we like good food, we drink, and we sit around thinking about really complicated ethically type things. Because of that, I will say though, it is because of that history and the sociology of it there, that a lot of people will just jump to the objective morality camp, and they
Yeah.
will just end the conversation. And they put it really plainly. They say, look, we've been talking about this for so long. We all kind of think about it. We all kind of feel it in ourselves. It must obviously be real, right? And I just think that does a really bad job of actually trying to engage with the non-realist side here, right? And there's a lot of different ways that you can do it, right? It's not just, a lot of people will say relativism, right? And I think it's worth mentioning that, as with all things, right? There's a bunch of different definitions, but in certain spaces and certain contexts, like certain words are really specific. Like when you say in a philosophical context, okay, and this might bum some of our people out, but just call in if you're upset. When you are writing a paper and you're using atheist regularly, you are pretty regularly saying that a God does not exist. You are taking that stance. That's fine. I don't in general take that stance. I have a slightly more nuanced stance, which is every version of a God that I have ever heard does not exist because it either fails logically or physically in some way, right? There's some problem to it. It's unfalsifiable, and I don't accept anything that's unfalsifiable. Those types of things, right? But like maybe there's a version out there that I don't know of, maybe that I could come across that makes sense to me. But when we are talking about relativism in the space of morality and stuff. What we're talking about is like cultural relativism oftentimes. And what that means is that the morality of a specific group of people is correct for those people because of their culture, right?
Yeah.
And I don't accept that. I do not accept that stance, because what that means is ultimately that there still is there is like, it's like there's objective morality, but it's like not fully objective. Like it exists out. It's like not a full God, but like minor gods, you know, demigods type of thing. It's like, I don't think real God, I don't think a full God is real. I don't think these half gods are real either, you know? So when somebody says to me like, oh, well, if you think morality is subjective, or you don't think there's an objective morality, you're just a relativist. It's like, well, no, hang on. That has a very specific meaning in this context, and that is not what I mean. When I am talking about subjective or objective, okay, I am talking about two very specific things. And again, from my understanding, and believe me, you will get lots of great information by going and watching Dr. Bush's stuff. But the understandings of objective and subjective has to do with things like independent or dependent on your preferences. Okay. So stance dependence or stance independence is the way that a lot of people talk about this. Another way of thinking about this is related to or coming from a mind, right? So for instance, with that one, when somebody says to me, as a Christian, as a believer in a God of some kind, I have objective morality because it comes from the mind of God. Well, that already falls foul of what I'm talking about, because it's coming from a mind. You can say that it's the mind of God. That's fine. That's fine. But that doesn't make it objective in my sense. And honestly, I don't actually think it makes it objective in their sense. I just think they're misunderstanding the terms that they're using, right? So they don't believe that the reason gravity exerts a force on a free-falling object of 9.8 meters per second squared towards the center of the earth, they don't think that that exists because God thought it. They think God put into place systems, of which one of them being gravity, right? Yeah. The actual stretching and pulling of space-time, okay? That causes things to kind of fall into that hole into space-time, and boom, gravity. There we go. They don't believe that God just like sat around one day and said, you know, what's a good number for acceleration towards Earth? 9.8 meters. Yeah, that's not what they believe, right? At least I'm sure there's somebody out there, but more often than not, you know. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just kind of interrupt me at any point. Tell me to shut up.
Oh no, I was gonna say the intelligent designers might, you know.
Yeah, that's true. And those guys are so far. Look, they have so much fucking work to do anyway before they get to this conversation that it's like, whatever. But the one that I think is really, really interesting is the stance dependent, stance independence. Okay. And this can be a little confusing at first. And I totally understand why it is difficult to really bring this into the way that you view morality, right? Because it seems very much that we all say things are good and bad. We seem to all have these thoughts and feelings inside of us, right? As to like, oh, I like that. I don't like that. You know, I want that thing. I don't want that thing. You know, when we hear about somebody that is torturing babies just for the fun of it, right? We start to go, oh gosh, yeah, that's not good. That makes us feel bad. But I think it's important that we focus on that last little caveat there of just for the fun of it. Because that seems to me already an indication that there's not objective morality. Because it seems to me like what we're granting inherently in that understanding is that possibly there would be a place where we would recognize torture of babies as being okay in some instances for some reason. Now, I would push back and say, I think when we use the word torture, there are certain words that when we say them, we're saying that there is no morally correct stance, right? When we say murder, what we're not talking about is self-defense. You don't murder somebody in self-defense. You may take their life, you may kill them, but you don't murder them. Murder is specifically the killing of an innocent person, right? And so I think the word torture, you know, is like, okay, that kind of denotes that it's bad. But let's just say stabbing, okay? Stabbing babies for fun is wrong. Is stabbing babies always wrong? Because I think almost everybody would agree, right? Again, unless you're just crazy about biology and stuff. But, you know, vaccinations work. We know this. They're one of the most tried and true tested sciences that we've got out there. And I would absolutely stab babies if it is in the context of giving them vaccines for measles and polio and all these other things, right? And so of course somebody's gonna clip that and it's just gonna be me saying I want to stab babies.
I am sure, yeah. I mean, we could go as far as to say, yeah, if you use the term torture versus using the term, okay, I'm going to slice babies up, but then you're actually talking about open heart surgery.
Right. And so, right, there are certain words that we already kind of inherently bring into them this extra moral context, right? But again, that does not mean that morality is objective, right? That doesn't mean that that's the case. It just means that it seems to be the case that the vast majority of biological organisms with this type of genetic code, they don't seem to like this that much, you know? So again, going back to the terminology of stance dependent or stance independent, what that relates to is literally how you feel about something, right? It's really simple. It sounds like it's really difficult, but it isn't, because let me put it to you like this. What's your favorite color, AJ?
Purple.
Purple. Awesome. I love purple too. I've got a lot of things that are purple. In fact, let me show you one of my favorite purple things right here. Purple, right?
About that.
What color is it?
So it looks kind of black and kind of gray, but I think
looks kind of black, looks kind of gray. Think it's black. Okay, but I thought purple was your favorite color.
Right.
How do you feel about black? Is black your favorite color?
It's my second favorite.
It's the second favorite color. Okay, so maybe because, okay, so here's the thing. Maybe because black is your second favorite color, you're seeing this purple object as black. So let's try something different. What's a color you really don't like? Like, how do you feel about red or blue? Not a big fan of either of those, or?
I don't like brown.
Don't like brown. Perfect. Oh my God, look at this. A purple notebook right here. Purple notebook, right? Am I wrong?
The worst shade of brown.
Okay, see, here's what I think. I think because you don't like brown, that is changing how you view this book. Now, obviously that's silly, right? Obviously that little experiment there is a bit silly. The reason that I'm pointing that out is because if you do that exact same thing with moral statements, the book absolutely becomes purple. Time and time again. When you say to somebody, hey, is this moral? Is this good? Is this bad? Almost always what they are coming at you with is an acceptance that they like certain outcomes and they don't like other outcomes. So go ahead, please.
No, I was going to ask, would that qualify as consequentialism, like an outcome-based sort of, like, depending on the outcome, then you...
It does have a lot of overlap with consequentialism, but it isn't exactly the same thing. And the reason is because with consequentialism, you're saying the consequences are what makes it good or bad, whereas what I'm talking about is something a little bit, just a step or two back. So one of the things that comes up often is something called emotivism. And emotivism is essentially people saying, hey, man, when we're talking about morality, really at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're saying, like, I like purple. I don't like brown as much, you know? And that's why we're not big fans of, say, torturing animals, is because really we just don't like torturing animals. That is our stance from the beginning. And then we get to the consequences of the torturing animals I don't like. So in consequentialism, it's just a little bit flipped, which is despite your opinion of something, the consequences of the action should determine whether or not it's good or bad. I broadly, I like both of those very much. I think there's great value in both of those understandings. And I think it radically changes the way that you view a lot of the problems and, more importantly, a lot of the solutions in this world, right? Because no longer do I think people are just, for instance, just being evil for the sake of being evil, right? I am now more in the camp of saying, you know, the vast majority of these people are sincerely convinced that this thing is correct for whatever their methodology is for getting to that. Now, I think most of us just don't do a very good job with that. I totally understand why. It's very difficult. It takes a long time. I've been very boring and annoying most of my friends for about 20 years now. So I don't expect everybody to do that, right? But again, what often happens in this conversation, because many of us have not gone through looking at it, is that when we start to have these conversations, it brings up all of these feelings inside of us. We have all of these stances, whether or not we've ever expressed them, right? Whether or not we've ever put them out there. I have a feeling about liver and onions ice cream. And in that context, right, all of us out here go, oh yeah, if some dude likes liver and onions ice cream, like that's just his opinion. That's not a fact about the world. And it's like, okay, so hold on to that thought for just a second longer and bring that into the space of mathematics. Does your feelings on the number 2 change the sum of 1 + 1?
No, but I still hate math.
And that's fine. We can hate math, right? We can hate calculus. I happen to be, again, a nerd. I love calculus. It's awesome. But we can have all of these feelings, but we put those to the side when it comes to certain facets of our life. And in other facets of our life, it is the only thing that matters. Like when it comes to your favorite pizza toppings, man, every single one of us is going to have a different thing, and every single one of us is going to be convinced that pineapple on pizza is or is not okay, you know? But it's interesting because in that arena, we recognize, oh yeah, like that's all just that's all just me. It's coming from my brain. It's all about my stances. And then in this arena over here about mathematics, right? Chemistry, physics, we say, no, our feelings about it don't matter at all. The numbers are the numbers, the molecules are the molecules. But then there's this weird space when it comes to morality where we seem not to be able to know exactly what it is. And again, I think that's a pretty decent indication that it is in fact subjective. The fact that we have been arguing about it for so long and not a damn person argues about times tables 1 through 10. Guys, come on. You know, that's at least my thought on it.
But it is totally subjective, even from a biological standpoint, like, because if you look at people's brain structures, different structures are going to lead that person to have different responses,
correct,
even different emotional
correct
responses to somebody kicking a puppy,
exactly,
pineapple on pizza.
And we know this, and even deeper than that, right? We know that there are certain physical constructions of the brain and the human body that do not allow the individual to have that empathetic connection.
Oh, yeah.
They have mirror neurons, but they don't function in the same way that other people's do. We also know that there are other people that do feel all that stuff, but regularly suppress. We know extra, we know suppression, we know there are people that literally do not feel pain when their hand is touching a hot stove. And all of that will change the stances that they have when it comes to these types of things. Because again, at the end of the day, like it would all come back to us completely different, right? I'm sure you've probably heard this before about like, if all people were just wiped off the earth, just in a blink of an eye, and new life forms evolved, and eventually millions of years went by and humans evolved again, right? We'd have all the same math. We'd have all the same science, right? A pound of feathers would still fucking weigh a pound, okay? And 2 plus 2 would still equal 4. None of that would change. But our religions, our TV shows, our famous authors and plays and actors and actresses and music, all of this would be different. And you know what? So would our moral constructions. They would too, because in reality, they are entirely from us. Now, that doesn't mean, and this is what a lot of people get very upset about. They think that
it's chaos.
Yes, and they think that if we don't have objective morality, the whole world turns to shit because you don't have any justification. You can't tell other people that what they're doing is wrong. Well, first off, let me just throw this out there. What my argument is in general, just so we're on the same page, is that you don't have justification. You can say that I don't have justification, and that's fine. I'm willing to accept that. I think I do. I think I can back it up here in a second, but I'm willing to accept I don't have justification. The problem is, though, you're in the same boat, right? So if we move on from that, and we say, well, you can't tell anybody that what they're, how would you tell Hitler that he was wrong? First off, like, can we just use another terrible person? Like Pol Pot was a horrible person. Can we just use somebody else? I'm just saying, like Pinochet wasn't great, right? I just use somebody else. Anyway, here's the thing though. A, yes, I can, right? The Holocaust was wrong. Look, I just did it. And then B, more importantly, neither can you. No, again, we're in the same boat. If you had the effectiveness that you were claiming that you did, this conversation wouldn't be happening, and it is happening. And so in both camps, you don't actually get anything, because if they can't get you, if they can get you to fight on the, oh, well, I have a justification, blah, blah, blah. If they can get you to fight on that, then they don't have to worry about the actual effectiveness, which is the position that they will always default to when everything else fails for them. I see it time and time and time again. People argue and argue and argue about justification. And if they finally can get past that for just a second, they'll say, yeah, well, your system fails because nobody will listen. Right. But whether or not people listen doesn't change the equation.
Right.
That
is not the question.
Exactly. 2 plus 2 is 4, and 2 times 2 is 4. And nothing about whether or not I can get anybody else to accept that number, that doesn't change the number. The thing is, though, again, when it comes to things like flavors of ice cream, toppings on pizza, and moral conversations, it does seem to matter. And again, I think that is really good indication that it is subjective,
And I will say, the pineapple is a fruit and tomato is a fruit. So pineapple belongs on pizza. Fuck off.
It's a fruit pie. Pies have fruit in them sometimes. I'm just saying, Look, I've said this a couple of times when this comes up, which is I was staunchly anti-pineapple on pizza until I tried pineapple with pepperoni, bacon, and jalapeno on a thin crust pizza. That changed my mind. That was really good. But anyway, the point is that when it comes to the effectiveness, it doesn't matter whether or not the truth, right? It doesn't matter whether the truth is effective, right? The truth just is what it is, right? And what we mean when we say that is not that I have my truth, you have your truth, the truth is somewhere in the middle. No, what we mean is whether or not AJ or I gives a crap about the color, of this book, it doesn't matter. The color of that book is that color. So if you change, right? If it changes for you based on how you feel about it, then that can't be objective. it has to be stance dependent. And if it's stance dependent, then it means we're all in the same boat and we all have to justify our things the best way we can. Now, all justification has a hole in the center. Okay. Every single argumentation, every logical construction, all of it falls into the same trap every time. Okay. Trilemma, Agrippa's trilemma or Munchausen's trilemma. I prefer Munchausen's, but very simple. You got three main things at the end of the day when it comes to your epistemology, when it comes to knowing shit, right? Either it's an infinite regress, it just goes all the way back, just something justifies the justification that justifies and it just goes back eternally. There's no starting point, it just keeps going, right? Or you got this thing where it's just circular. See, the first justification justifies the second one, which justifies the third one, which justifies the first one, which is why it works. And then the third one is just you just asserting shit, basically. It's just you saying, look, we have to stop somewhere. This is where we stop. Okay. So all justifications, all arguments, all logical trains, they all have the same massive problem. Okay. The bridge is out and nobody has been able to fix it, but they are on equal footing. They're all on equal footing. And once we pick one, we can make lots of progress. So for instance, recognizing, like for myself, that when I talk about the nature of moral stances and moral argumentation, right? When I look at it from the perspective of really at the end of the day, what people are doing is they're expressing their stances. They're saying, I don't really like killing of people, especially if they're innocent. I really, really don't like just harming puppies for no reason. I really don't like that stuff. That helps me a lot. It allows me to engage further with the conversation because I'm able to go deeper and figure out what it is that is underpinning this methodology for getting them to this conclusion, right? A lot of times people don't know, and I'm not faulting anybody for that, right? We all have lots of work that we need to do. But when somebody says to me, for instance, like we were talking about, space travel and hungry kids, all that jazz. When somebody says to me, do you really think we should just completely end the space program, or, do you really think we should just let kids go hungry? It's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So you don't like kids being hungry, all right? Like you don't like the idea that we don't have a space program, right? Why? What is the thing that's underpinning that, right? That allows me, at least, to go much deeper, to understand better, and to actually find progress. Because I really hate the conversations where we walk away and we haven't done anything.
Finished. Yeah.
Like there's nothing, we just kind of stop because they say, my God's objective. And I go, well, I don't think so. And they go, well, if God's not objective, then you have no reason not to kill people. And I say, well, I don't want to kill people, right? I don't think that's a good way for us to live in society. And even if it's just entirely selfish, like I just don't want to live in a world where I could be at risk of being murdered, right? I just think that's bad, when they say, oh, well, somebody else could just come along and think something different. It's like, well, you're not attempting to engage, right? Because I can just say the same thing about you and it doesn't get us anywhere. Like engage with it for a second. Like, what if that's really just what the world is, right? I'm trying to give grace to your side of it. I'm trying to say, hey, look, maybe it is the case. Maybe it is the case that just like mathematics, there is some conception out there that equals objective morality, right? I just don't know what that is. I'm not saying because of that it doesn't exist. I'm simply saying if somebody wants to assert that, you have to present it, right? You have to present that argumentation, that evidence, whatever. I mean, like for instance, I'm seeing Golden in the chat saying
I wish they would call.
I wish you would too. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to talk to you.
Will be nice. I promise.
So like, cool. Like the way that you're using objective here is what's the word? Equivocation. Thank you. You're equivocating on what we mean by objective. You know, so like the law objectively says that you have to pay taxes, right? Because what you mean by objective in that sense is that we all can like look at it and see what it says. Right? There is a law on the books with the words, you need to do XYZ, right? Cannot do XYZ, right? But that's not what we're talking about when we talk about objective or subjective in this context, right? Again, and you may not have been here for it, but we're talking about from a human mind, dependent on a human mind or independent of a human mind, right? And then more specifically about independent of stances or dependent on your stances or preferences, right? Laws are subjective 100% under that understanding. It just absolutely 100%, no question, laws are subjective. And the reason we know this, because the laws have clearly changed in our lifetime. They clearly changed based on how we feel about things. At one point in the United States, and believe me, guys, this was objectively the law. At one point in the United States, our Supreme Court literally said, Black people are the same as chairs. They are, in fact, your property, right? Mm-hmm. The reason we made that law is because of the stances of the individuals at the time. Years later, when people got their heads out of their asses, that law was changed. So, again, and I know you're just honestly, you know what? Hang on. It's worth saying this. Golden Arm, I'm glad you're not strong enough to call in because you honestly couldn't have this conversation. And I don't like to belittle people, but just the fact that you said man's law can change shows me you have no idea what you're talking about in this context. So it's okay. I'm glad you don't call in. It's not worth your time. You're not going to have a good time. So it's okay. You can be scared. That's fine. Go run. Like I said, Dr. Lance Bush has a lot of wonderful stuff on this. Alex Malpass does too. Dr. Alex Malpass has some really good stuff. And then Phil Harper has talked about this as well. Skydive Phil on YouTube. I don't think he has a PhD, although I could be wrong. So if you do, I'm very sorry, Phil. Hey, Steve. I like Steve. Hey. A lot of the ways, again, that these conversations happen is where the person on the objective morality side wants to entirely move the conversation into their space. Like literally during that call, the guy said, if your morality is subjective, you lose. And it's like, that's the whole point of the conversation. The whole point of the conversation is to determine whether or not it is subjective or objective. So if it's subjective, you lose can't be how we play this game. It just can't be because we're already accepting that it's objective.
You can even put it in real tangible laws, right? Stealing is forbidden in the Bible. Okay, yep. So you're saying that it's coming from a deity that is above you, that is like your master. And so you cannot steal for any reason whatsoever because any reason for stealing is bad.
Yeah.
But in reality, if you have a mother with a little baby that goes and steals a can of formula, right? And she's walking out and somebody, and they catch her. And somebody there is like, hey, listen, it talks to the manager and it's like, hey, listen, I'll pay you double what it was going to be.
Let her go feed her kid.
And you do, and they accept it. Sure. Was it wrong?
Yeah.
It was stealing. You can still call it stealing because it was the action of taking without paying for it.
Correct. Right.
But was it bad? Was it evil?
Right.
No.
And especially, I'm so glad you brought that up because that is such a great lens to kind of look at the objective morality coming from God or religious context, right? Because oftentimes what they will do is a version of divine command theory. Although anybody worth their salt in this space, and I'm just going to say it just flat out true, okay? If you are in this conversation advocating for divine command theory, you absolutely need to go sit back down at the kids' table. You are not ready for this conversation and you are making yourself look like a fool. Okay? Plain and simple. That is just not something that is legitimately discussed. And you don't need to take my word for it. There are many, many places, reputable places, that show you all of their work. That is not something that is talked about by the people that actually know their stuff. Okay. It is like legitimately advocating for the descent of man, that picture, where it's the monkey and then it like goes into it's like legitimately saying that's how humans evolved is not something that comes up in evolutionary biology. Just anybody in that field, that is not what we talk about. It's just plain and simple. So, but oftentimes the religious will more or less use a version of divine command theory, whether they recognize it or not, because what they're saying at the end of the day is if God's stances were different, it would be correct. And the reason we know this is stealing is a fantastic one, because stealing is defined as taking something that isn't yours, right? Taking something that isn't yours without adequate compensation, okay?
Right.
In and of itself does not seem to denote the same level of severity that torture and murder do, right? And there are other words that we can bring into this context, but for censorship, YouTube and TikTok. I hate that we have to talk like fucking children sometimes on this stuff. Like I don't say grape. I think that's stupid. But anyway, the point is, murder. Let's use murder. Let's use stealing. Okay, murder has this killing of an innocent person. We're saying it's not justified. Stealing, we already seem to put it on this lower tier of severity, right? It's just taking something that isn't yours. It isn't necessarily doing it with intent to harm. It isn't necessarily depriving somebody of something so vital that it causes, untoward suffering for the rest of their lives. It's just saying you have acquired some physical object that wasn't in your possession before, and you did it without adequately providing, something back for the person who got their stuff taken. Stealing occurs in the Bible regularly. It happens all the time. In fact, the entire understanding of the Israelite conquest of Canaanites, right? The whole big fun thing about Joshua and the walls of Jericho, all they did was murder people and steal all their shit. Okay. But it's not murder and it's not stealing. Why? Specifically because of the stance that God has on the actions and the outcomes of those individuals. Because God has told Joshua and the Israelite army, these individuals are wicked. They are evil. And the goods that they have and the services that they provide to each other are to their core evil. They bring evil into this world and they perpetuate it like crazy. That justifies the killing, because no longer are they innocent people. We're not murdering. We may be still killing. We may still be taking their life, right? But go one step further. Stealing, we're not stealing. Are we taking something that wasn't ours without adequate compensation? Yes, we are. But why is it still not stealing? Because they acquired it through wrongful means. And they are using it to spread evil in the world. That is the reason that it is okay. And thus, again, what it is saying is two things. One, it is entirely dependent on God's stance. And two, it is actually the worst type of moral understanding you could possibly have, which is divine command theory. It's gross. It's terrible. And it's what has justified genocide for generations. So yeah, I see we have a call. I'll shut up.
I do. So sorry. I didn't want to
No, please shut me up. Shut me up at any point. Tell me, you know me well enough. Just say, Elliot, Jesus Christ, man.
I know, but I really wanted to see where that ended. So, okay. Yeah. I don't know exactly what was happening, but I'm sitting here thinking about what you're talking about while we wait. And it's like, if I start to wonder if all of these moral dilemmas that we have,
Mm-hmm.
uh, all of these morality stances that we have, they all come from individual minds. And sure, we can collectively come to the conclusion that murder is wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say we live in like a futuristic world society and a criminal commits like a really horrible murderous torturous act, one of the
Mm-hmm.
two that we can clearly say is bad. And then scientists erase their memory and they completely rewrite their personality to someone who, or like restructure their brain, in a way that will reshape it so that they really almost for sure will not be able to commit such a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Is it justice, or is it, are they getting away without punishment? Like what matters the most?
Yeah,
And
good.
we got him back. Okay,
Good.
we're
Well,
gonna have to
we'll
put the
check.
question.
Chris, are you still? All right, Chris, are you there? Okay, we've got him up just in case. Chris, if you can hear me, your phone might have gone asleep again, or it might have dropped. I'm not positive. I don't have. I'm being a bad host. I don't have the thing. Oh, Chris, are you there?
There are sounds, and they
I
may
know
be
there were
from
sound.
our crew.
They may
I
be from our
think.
crew, right? Right. Okay. Okay.
Um,
Well, that's fine. That's fine. I'll talk about that because I think that is a really interesting space to go. This gets into a little like futurist sci-fi type of stuff. So it does very much seem to me that our understandings of the world around us and how we should engage with it is maybe not 100% dependent, but seems very obviously tied to the physical structure of our brains. That very much seems the case to me. Okay. At this point, with all of the different imaging we can do, with all of the different science and biology and physiology that we understand, it very much seems to me that the structure of our brain is very, very critical to how we understand these types of things and these conversations. And so I do think, right, I know this is crazy, you guys, just bear with me. We're totally hypothetical, philosophical right now. I do think if it were possible, which I'm not saying it is, I don't know. We did map a fly's brain for the first time, you guys. There's a 3D model you can go look at. It's fascinating. Everybody should do it. If it were possible that we were able to understand the construction of the human brain to the point that we were able to understand certain neural connections being related to XYZ feelings or acceptance of belief or actions, yada, 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 then yeah, we could do stuff like that. Where somebody who currently in our system is called like a sociopath or a psychopath. And I don't think those terminologies are used as much anymore. I could be wrong, but basically in general, what we're talking about when we talk about somebody in those categories is an individual who has a physiological structure in their brain that is so radically different from the vast majority of people that it causes them to think, behave, in certain ways, right?
yeah,
And oftentimes one of the biggest things is the fact that they just genuinely don't feel empathy or a connection to other human beings, which seems very common, again, not just to people, but mammals. Fucking monkeys do it, rats do it, horses do it, dogs do it, all of them, okay? So in a totally hypothetical sense, I think there is the possibility that the understanding of the brain and the reconstruction of the physical structures could result in a dramatic change for the good in the way people, behave and the things that they believe. As to the question of justice, that's a really difficult one. And I think one of the reasons that it's so difficult is because we all kind of know what justice is. But it seems very obvious to me that justice is a lot more squishy and shaky than what we pretend it is, right? Justice is a lot like spicy foods. Okay. I don't think paprika is fucking spicy. I'll go get a goddamn spoonful of that and fucking drink it, man. Like that shit is not spicy. But cayenne is spicy to me. But to my father, he don't give a shit until it's like, 100,000 Scovilles. Okay. So what is spicy? Well, it generally refers to something that has a heat kind of feeling to us, it's tingling in the tongue and these types of sensations and so forth. I think when we're talking about justice, what we're talking about is equaling of the scales and evening of the scales in some capacity. And I think that we oftentimes have a very skewed understanding of that. For instance, I don't think, and I know it looks like we have a call, and I'm so sorry, caller. Just hang on for five more seconds. Yeah, just one more second. I will absolutely shut up. I swear. But when it comes to justice, I think we have a very skewed understanding of that. And one of the reasons I point to that is because regularly in the conversation about the deportation of immigrants into a society, right? This is something that comes up regularly. And even the most human rights oriented, leftist, open borders type people will still say this to me, and it drives me crazy. Okay. They will say, well, we shouldn't just deport anybody, but if they committed like a heinous crime, we should deport, if they murdered somebody, we should deport them. How does that equal the scales in the community that was wronged? How does exiling somebody to 1,000 fucking miles away make the community whole? I think the reason is because we have a skewed version of justice that often is more about retribution than it is about justice. And I think in this particular scenario, it might be just. It might be justice if and only if we are at the biological and medical, social and legal capability and understanding to actually know all of these various outcomes. Right. Now, are we there? I don't think so. Will we ever be there? I'm not sure, but possibly. I don't know if that answered shit, you guys. I'm so sorry.
Right. So, but the reason I asked that question is because it leads me to thinking of the system that we use for punishment. And a lot of people are so focused on punishment that they don't think about the humanist part of
100%.
Rehabilitation.
Yes.
That you can, sure, we do have, okay, I don't know the correct term. I think it's diagnosed psychopathy, where you have people who actually have structural and chemical visible changes that you can tell or diagnose and do not have the capacity to experience whatever empathy, etc. But we do have the ability to rehabilitate, I will say, more than likely the majority of people who, the vast majority.
And even if we don't, and even if we, first off, I agree. I absolutely think that's the case. It may take a little bit more time and effort and money, but you know what? We don't got fuck else to do in this world, you guys. Okay. But even if we don't, okay, even if we don't, my view is one where that situation clearly tells us that the answer is to segregate the individual so they can't continue to cause more harm to others, and then treat them humanely. Man, you want to see the most human rights loving motherfucker turn into the most psychopathic piece of shit out of nowhere? Tell them that prisoners deserve human rights. Man, I swear to you, I have in my lifetime the most hippie, the most peace loving, in an instant. You tell them that you think that child, bad word people, that they deserve the same human rights as others. They deserve the right to continue living their life. We as a society shouldn't just take that from them arbitrarily. Like, woo, watch somebody just completely lose their shit. I mean, I'm telling you.
Or that we're against the death penalty.
100% across the board. It does not matter who, it does not matter where, it does not matter the justification. I am 100% against the death penalty. It absolutely does not logically, economically, morally make sense. It doesn't in any situation whatsoever. So
It really doesn't.
That's my view on it. I know
Okay.
that's a
I'm glad we're on the same page there.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. It's
we
easy.
are the outliers on that one.
I know. We'll get there one day. A good few of the states in the United States have abolished the death penalty permanently. So I hope more states will do that. This is one of the reasons why I continually come back to. I don't say that I'm an emotivist exactly, but I think a lot of that has value, and I align with a lot of what those types of people are saying, but definitely non-realist in the moral camp, right? Because there is part of me, right? I know this. I can feel it. It is just entirely about my stance. I fully agree that there is something that eats me away inside whenever somebody tells me, yeah, for no reason whatsoever, I just destroyed my television. Like, there's something about that makes me go, ugh. And so I want to find a justification that leads me to be able to stand on the position that it is immoral, right? But again, what that makes me come back to is that if my stance was different, would I view that differently? And every fucking time I say yes. Now, that may just be me, right? I may just be wrong on something, right? But I actually think that's what everybody else is doing too. And I think I can demonstrate that. And I have many times. And I think, and again, other people that take this similar stance to me also get to the same places. And that's why I keep coming back to this. But time and time again, it just feels to me like we fall into a place where ultimately at the end of the day, it's subjective. But here's the good things, folks. Here's the good news, okay? All of the things that you want from an objective morality are in a subjective morality. And in fact, I believe they are there stronger, and we are more likely to achieve those outcomes, right? You do not lose the ability to tell somebody that what they are doing is harmful. That does not go away in a subjective morality. In fact, it is stronger because of the recognition that both you and I have no choice in the matter. We are forced because of the stances that we took prior to this conversation or this consequence. Because of that fact, we are actually able to stand more firmly on the stance that I think this is wrong. You know, I really do think that's the case. You don't lose any of the good things about an objective system, and you gain a lot more with a subjective system.
I don't know. Wherever you're selling, I'm buying it. Take my money.
Yeah. Send in a super chat, people. Send a super chat.
Exactly. All right, guys, listen. Secular Jesus here has sacrificed enough time for our morality today. He needs to go take a 3-day nap to cover all of the sins that we committed tonight throughout this episode. So we're gonna go ahead before I kill him with laughter. We're not crucifying you. We're just making you laugh to death today. Anyways, we're all right. So I'm gonna have